Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second day of the MCC Budapest Summit. We welcome you all, and we hope that from yesterday's Prophets of Doom, this day will be a bit happier on one note. Distinguished guests, Director General, members of the Matthias Corvinus Collegium Board of Trustees, students, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. We shall begin our second day of the panel discussions discussing possible ways out of the crisis. The moderator of our first panel is Dr. Bence Bauer, Director of the Hungarian-German Institute for European Cooperation at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium. Please give our panelists a warm round of applause, and let's start the day. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. As mentioned, I'm the director of the German-Hungarian Institute here at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium. This institute is a newly launched institute. It's only 2 years old, dealing with all aspects of bilateral relations. It's actually a single-issue think tank. And I'm really delighted to see so many of you this morning. It's wonderful that on this rainy morning you opted to go to the MCC building on this Saturday. And I really see that there is a big interest wherever there is Germany on the agenda. And I think that shows the clear importance why it's so important to have this institute and to invite German guests. But of course, we have not only German guests. We have a very mixed round table here this morning. I may start with introducing the panelists this morning and welcoming Dr. Marie-Theres Thiell, who is today a managing director of the DialogUngarn business network. She worked in the energy industry, RWE Energy, for over 30 years. 15 years she was here with the focus of Eastern and Central Europe here in Hungary. Until 2020, she was a divisional board member of the Networks of Eastern Europe of Energy SE, and in personal union, the chairwoman of the board of Power Supply Budapest and Northeast Hungary. 10 years CEO of ELMēe, you know ELMēe, 5 years before CFO of ELMēe. She has a doctorate in law, is familiar with German-Hungarian economic relations, and has an extensive network in the business community in both countries. So she's the really good expert if combining and comparing our two societies. Furthermore, the networking of women in business is particularly important to her, which is why she's involved in the board of the VDU Landesverband Westfalen and the International Commission. She's also a trustee of the foundation of the University of Miskolc, as the only foreign person in Hungary who is ever member of any of such university board of trustees, so she's a unique example. And is a board member of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Budapest. Dr. Thiell, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and these kind words. I'm impressed of MCC, of the building, of the colleagues here, and I'm the first time here, so I will enjoy the morning.
Great. Warm welcome. On my left, Dr. Thomas Narbeshuber, who is not a German but an Austrian national. He was born in Vienna, studied chemistry at the Technical University of Vienna, and after earning his doctorate in 1994 at the University of Twente in the Netherlands, he did a postdoc at the Centre National de Recherche Scientifique in Lyon, France. He started his career 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, at the BASF. You know BASF, a big German company, Badische Analin- und Sodafabrik, the full name. His journey has been exciting with many interesting challenges and diverse experiences across the international boundaries of this great company. Since 2014, he leads the operation of BASF Central and Southeast Europe as the vice president of the whole BASF group. Besides his position in the company, he's serving in the board of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and is leading the EU Green Deal working groups in the German-Hungarian and American Chambers of Commerce in Hungary. For the German Eastern European Business Association, he acts as a speaker for Southeast Europe. Very warm welcome to you, Dr. Narbeshuber.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
And last but not least, we have a speaker who really is a German and really comes directly from Germany as the only one, Professor Dr. Fritz Söllner, who is the head of the Department of Public Finance of the Ilmenaui Műszaki Egyetem in Thuringia, Germany. He worked before as a junior lecturer at the University of Bayreuth, Germany, and as a John F. Kennedy Research Fellow at the Harvard University. His research interests include, besides the history of economic thought, environmental economies, and the economics of migration. Among recent publications are the textbooks Die Geschichte des ökonomischen Denkens in the Springer Publishing House and the papers The Use and Abuse of Robinson Crusoe in Neoclassical Economics and Towards a Rational Migration Policy. On September 2022, his latest book, Krise als Mittel zur Macht, was published. His book addresses the question of what elements link the many recent crises and how politics reacts to all of those. Thank you very much to accept your invitation, Professor Söllner. Warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
I myself lived for more than 20 years in Germany, and when we have been discussing the outline of this panel this morning, when we have been discussing how to address all these tough questions, I found out a very specific characteristics of German people, a German-speaking community. Germans are really extremely to the point, really goal-oriented, and really are looking forward in a very pragmatic sense on solutions. And that's the reason why we gave the name to the panel, Possible Ways Out of the Crisis. So we are immediately not only lamenting about the past, but also looking to the future and presenting you very concrete proposals, very concrete ideas that we shall elaborate. And of course, this can be of good use for all of us. And I encourage you to ask your questions. I think the Slido code is written on the wall, 417217. You can write in your questions, and after approximately 1 hour of discussion, we shall have 20-25 minutes for your questions, depending on the amount of questions, of course. The setup of the panel will be, when we look at our panelists who are all renowned experts in this topic, that we shall a little bit come concretely to how we came to this crisis, what's the background of it, how societies react to that, how companies can give concrete proposals, how they are affected, what they can do. And of course, we shall also not forget to interlink all the last crises of the last years, for I think Professor Dr. Söllner is really a great asset for us this morning. I may start with a general introductory remark. The panelists have the floor, so this is what we agreed to, just give them the possibility in 3-5 minutes to elaborate how they see where we come from, how all these crises came from, where's the background. If you have some input ideas for that, maybe we start with Dr. Thiell.
Yeah, thank you, Bence. I would like to have a view back. Nearly 1 year ago, in Germany, there was the governmental elections, and I would say it was a break in the German politics because the era of Angela Merkel ended, and we got a three-party coalition which governed, and in the first months they quickly came together, so no long negotiations about the coalition. They started. They were well welcomed from the population, and because the inhabitants, the population wanted a change in politics. And then after a few months, this coalition was faced with the starting of the war. I'm totally sure they didn't expect such a crisis in their early stage. They have just finished the celebration of their victory, and they had to come into a crisis modus. Of course, in autumn 2021, we were still in the middle of the COVID crisis, but I think Germany, as well as other European countries, has managed this crisis quite well. And okay, the economy was affected, but it just came out of this valley. The economy just over the year changes started again. And with the vaccines, what was available, the COVID lost the the people lost the fear about COVID. But then started the war, and it was quite difficult, or it is still quite difficult, for the three-party government to agree on measures which really can match the crisis. Yeah, from my point of view, it takes too long to come to an agreement. And of course, crisis management needs real experience, and the majority of the decision makers are new in their position. Really be a high-ranked decision maker. And in a crisis, also when laws are made, this can make mistakes, like everybody can make mistakes, then they have to adjust the laws again. And we are in the middle of this status at the moment in Germany. And I think this main topic, which mainly affects the industry especially, and by the industry then also the income of the people, the lack of energy resources is one key point, yeah, and maybe we elaborate later on that as well, what to do with this, and where are the solutions out of this crisis. But I'm convinced every crisis has also chances in, and it's a law in economics. After a recession comes an outperformance. So, and we are still in front of a recession. That is definitely also the topic in Germany, and it will hurt the majority of the population. And the mood is, which then also affect the consumer mood. And this let's drop the demand on goods, on cars, on to buy new things, to make journeys, and the mood is at the moment not really optimistic. The people are afraid of, so I would say resilience is a next very important topic, and resilience of enterprises, how they can protect themselves to face this crisis and how to overcome this crisis. This will be the topic of the next months, and maybe also our points in our discussion here.
Thank you. Professor Söllner.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I beg to differ from Dr. Thiell. Policy didn't change at all. It's just a case of old wine in new bottles. But that's just by the way. If you want to find ways out of the crisis, we first of all have to know the causes of the crisis. In my mind, we have two different causes which at the moment overlap, partly at least. First cause is an old one. It's the catastrophic policy of the ECB during the last 12 years. Yes, this causes now a general inflation, due to the overexpansion of the money supply. You see, the monetary base has increased by 400% in the last 11 years. Whereas the real GDP increased in the Eurozone only by 16%. So that gives you some information about this discrepancy here. So general inflation is due to the ECB and not to Putin or to anybody else. Yeah? But we do have another problem, of course. This is the energy supply crisis, which is due to the war in Ukraine, the sanctions of the EU and the Western world, and the countermeasures of Russia. Okay, and the most conspicuous symptom of this crisis is the explosion of the energy prices, and here in this symptom, both causes of the crisis converge, as it were. Good. So what can we do to get out of this crisis? The EU member states and the national governments can do nothing at all about general inflation. This is up to the ECB, and the ECB does not want to do anything about it, and maybe even some governments welcome inflation in secret, but that's that. Now, what about the energy crisis? This is a supply crisis. Yeah? We do have too little energy, and that's why the prices are high. What do we do about it? I'm shocked to see that politicians nowadays only address, well, the symptoms. They propose one or another demand-side measure, lower one tax, give more transfer payments, and so on and so forth. But this won't solve the problem. Yeah, this won't solve the problem. The problem is we have too little energy. This is a supply crisis. What can we do to address this issue? Basically, there are two problems. Either we lift the sanctions and hope that Russia will resume normal gas supplies, or else we continue or even intensify the sanctions. What will happen then? If we continue with the sanctions, and this is the way it looks like at the moment, we have to do something about the energy supply, and there's only one way out of it, I think. We have to economize gas. We have to reserve the little gas that we have for the uses where there is no alternative. That is for heating of homes and for the process energy of the industry. You must not use this gas for electricity generation. Instead, you have to reactivate coal and nuclear power. This is the only possibility. You have to increase supply, and then prices will come down. Everything else, fiddling with the price mechanism and this and that, won't solve the crisis, will only produce unwanted and unforeseen side effects. And one thing else which has to be made totally clear, the rise in energy prices has led to the terms of trade worsening for Europe and for Germany, which means we have to work more, we have to produce more export goods to import a certain amount of gas or oil, what have you. This is a loss of growth, this leads to a loss of wealth, and there is nothing the government can do about it. It's utter nonsense to talk about relief. It's not possible to relieve this. Yeah? The only thing they can do is they can redistribute the burden. But if you provide relief for somebody else will have to bear the cost. Yeah? And this is what people ought to be told. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody again. Very happy to be here. We heard already two approaches to tackle the crisis. Before I go into to some proposals from our side, from the industry part, I would like to redefine the crisis together with you, and I'm happy to discuss with you this also afterwards when you ask your questions. I think we currently define this crisis as a poly crisis because it's not the war. It did not start with the war. The war is just the drop which made the barrel overflow. We have, as Professor Söllner said rightfully, we have structurally in Europe since long an energy deficit. Europe is importing approximately 50% of its energy demand. China, 25%. US is self-sufficient. They're exporters. So there you can see already where that comes from. And yesterday we heard a few panelists who nicely described the way in Europe how we came historically to the supply or the delivery of the Russian gas. But we have, so this is the energy side. Nevertheless, Europe did, I have to say, a great job in doing that over the past decades. Now, the second crisis we had just recently was COVID. We mentioned that, and this COVID crisis showed us one very important element for our further conclusions. It showed us that one, we cannot necessarily rely on other regions in this world for the supply chains. That might work under certain circumstances, but it does not work always. And that must lead to the conclusion, which you could read in the news over the past 2 years, where the COVID crisis was evident, that local for local or regional for regional was very important. But we had also other crises, crises under quotation marks. We had a migration crisis. We are having a workforce shortage, a systemic workforce shortage in Europe across the board, and this became even more evident after COVID. Yeah, go to the hotellery today. You saw what happened with the airlines. No one has personnel anymore. So there is a multitude of, I would say, challenges. But I would like to, before we then go into solution finding, I would like to state here that I am very, very optimistic for our future. Why? Because I'm now nearly 30 years in this industry, and this is my 7th severe crisis. It started in 1995 and it went over the Asia crisis in 1997 and so on. We had Lehman collapse and we came out of all of that. What it needs for that is collaboration. We need creative idea finding, and I'm happy to elaborate this later. And what we need desperately in Europe is unity. If we do not collaborate, if we let Europe be dissected by outside forces, whoever it is, we lose. Europe is strong and can only be strong if we are united and through our brain power. And with that, I would like to finish my initial statement.
Yeah, and both of you have stated out that the lack of energy resources is one key element of this crisis. And to be honest, this depends not only on the not gas supply from Russia. Yeah, it was foreseen for years in Europe. Yeah, that this energy shortage is there, like Tamás has elaborated, and gas was used and was seen as a bridge technology towards a transition and towards a future in energy from renewable sources. And unfortunately, now this bridge has broken. That's the situation. And therefore, I can agree with Tamás that this can be also seen as a positive side, because now comes pressure. Now comes pressure to the renewable energy. And for this, no country, that we have to be aware of, no country can go this way alone. We need a unified Europe. We need a collaboration of science and economy, yeah, and to bring the solutions in the way of cooperation forwards. Because the technique is there, but we need the investments and we need the collaboration.
I'm looking a little bit to your direction. Can we say that you mentioned the new German government, you mentioned diverse decisions also leading to the energy shortcut at the moment. Can we say that the ground was actually already prepared for such a crisis and now the war really hit in?
Yes, of course. I mean, the current crisis would be unimaginable without the energy policy of the last 2 decades at least. Yes, this ideological fixation on renewables, if I may call it that, the stop of coal and nuclear power, which, by the way, let the Wall Street Journal say that the German energy policy is the dumbest energy policy in all of the world. Well, all of that meant that we made ourselves dependent in a way on Russian gas supplies. So, and now, when there were severe political differences, well, look what happens. Yeah, of course, it's one of the consequences of the disastrous energy policy of the last 20 years. Another one being the extremely high energy prices in Germany, even before the crisis. I mean, even before the crisis, electricity in Germany in 21 was about 32 cents per kilowatt hour. In Hungary, it was 10 cents only. So, which is also a consequence of this energy policy. And of course, now the last straw that breaks the camel's back, the war, which brought things to a head. Yeah.
I would like to answer to that. I think in the midterm, I share your view. We need to be technology open. I think in the long term, what is very important for us, for all of us, and what is the key overarching driver of the globe currently, this is to create a society and an industry and a living which is sustainable. Because otherwise, this planet will not be livable anymore. And our children will not have the basis for the resources. So the overarching over everything must be to create an economy which is sustainable. Now, in the long run, and we heard this, or we have this still in the back of our minds, that renewable energy is more expensive and is hard to get. Today, it is such that you get onshore wind for 30 euros per megawatt hour. You get offshore wind for 50 euros per megawatt hour. A nuclear power plant costs you approximately 110, 120. Only in China it costs 60 or 70. Coal is about 80 euros and gas is at 50 euros. Not in Europe though, now. So, as a transition technology, yes, we need to facilitate everything which is possible now, be it LNG, but we need to dramatically drive forward renewable energies. And as we know, Europe does not have sufficient space to create all the renewable energies we would need. We need vectors. We need vectors that could be, we heard it yesterday, that could be hydrogen, but hydrogen is hard to transport, so it's better to have ammonia or other sources which you could generate, for example, in solar countries or where you have a lot of offshore wind, and ship the ammonia. We need to get to grips together in order to make this transition happen. And there's one, again, very positive study which I like to cite. Currently, I'm chemical industry. Chemical industry is raw material industry. Raw material industry is super important for Europe. We can discuss that a little bit later, but I just want you to take away this is super important. We must not let it die. Raw material industry is highly a high energy consumer. This is chemicals, steel, glass, paper, cement, and ores if you want. this is high energy consumers. And we did a study. If we want to decarbonize what we are doing now, if we want to decarbonize the chemical industry in Germany, we need approximately, and electrify all our processes, we need approximately 600 terawatt hours of electricity. To give you a flavor, this is the current total electricity demand of Germany, which would then be needed only by the chemical industry. This sounds dramatic, however, if you do it clever, across the board, if we insulate our houses, if we drive electric cars, if we utilize all the saving potentials in industry which are there, and if we then generate green electricity, a recent Boston consulting study, which was done for the German government, came to the conclusion that Germany would only need to increase its energy demand from 600 terawatt hours to 1,000 terawatt hours per year. So let's say 40% more, but with that we have Germany decarbonized. Now we need to decarbonize also all the other countries and Western Balkans, but I am very positive, and just to give you another positive thought, I'm running here every year in my region an innovation hub. This is a startup competition for young innovators, which we then evaluate, and they get in touch with BASF and so on. Many companies do that. And I see a lot of promising ideas. We need to foster these ideas because there is untapped potential for energy savings or new energy creation, which we don't even see today.
I wanted to put a little bit water into your wine. You are absolutely right. Renewable energy is the future, but be aware we need also baseload. Yeah, and here baseload, I come to your arguments. Yes, we need also nuclear power as baseload. With the coal, unfortunately, is this issue of sustainability and the question of CO2 emission and so on. But to use really a renewable, we need also investments in grid. Because either the wind is blowing where you don't consume the energy, or the sun is shining where you don't consume the energy out of the sun. And this needs also balancing energy. And now we come to the deepness of electricity business, yeah. But this grid investment, it's so important. And I would say in the European Union, they should really focus on that, and the European Union should invest in this grid because the electricity don't stop at borders. We are in Europe one united system for electricity. Yeah, this is a physical fact. And I recently listened to Attila Steiner, who elaborated on very clearly on the strategy of Hungary in the electricity business. They have 3 pillars. They want to become independent from Russian gas. So we are not discussing about sanctions or whatever. On the long term, they want to become independent of that. They want to have the energy transition, and the way they want to do it also focusing on renewable and nuclear. And in this topic, they wanted to invest, so I'm talking about Hungary, wanted to invest 16 billion euro in the next 10 years. And they have elaborated and narrowed it down to 25 measures. So very, very concrete measures. And so in this clearness, I was impressed about that, yeah. Of course, Hungary is now, as I said, a unified country, so they don't have the federalism system like we have in Germany, the Bundesrepublik, then comes the counties, then comes Bezirksregierung, then comes the cities. So a long decision chain. Yeah, here it is more in one hand. So this decision chain has, of course, advantages in the decision making. It's very democratic. Everybody can raise his voice. Yeah, but is it in the crisis the real good system? So
we can recommend the Hungarian system of state organization. No worries about that. Professor Söllner.
I would like to say that I agree with both of my colleagues here. Of course, in the long run, we have to rely on the renewables simply because the deposits of fossil fuels are finite. The question now, of course, is what is the long run? Yeah? I think the talk of impending doom is vastly exaggerated. Yeah? I mean, the planet will not go up in flames tomorrow or the next day. So the cost comparisons are completely correct, but vastly misleading, I'm afraid, because you neglect of the question of base load. You have to have a backup energy for all your cheap renewables. Yes, when the wind doesn't blow, when the sun doesn't shine, what are you going to do? Switch everything off or what? Yes. So, and this is why
I have a solution for that.
Wait a moment. This is why the energy in Germany is so expensive, because basically we do have two different energy systems: one renewables, and then a backup system with conventional energy. So yes, we have to transition to renewables and sustainability and so on and so forth. That's all very fine, but I do think we should do it in an economical way. Yes, we should proceed not ideologically, but well, cautiously, rationally, and always keeping in mind the relationship of cost and benefits. And I also think that we do have more time until say 2050 to become carbon neutral or climate neutral or what have you. Yes. Okay, that's. No.
You mentioned the point, Dr. Narbeshuber, of sustainability, and we know from December last year that even the European Commission granted the nuclear energy the label sustainable. So my question would be to three of you. Can we say, as a conclusion, that there is no way without atomic energy?
Now, if you look at the global energy demand, nuclear is, how do I say, verschwindend gering. This is
Slightly.
Very low contribution to the global energy supply. So that can be used.
Can be more.
That can be used if it's look. There are two hearts in my chest. I'm not dogmatic here, but can we consider nuclear energy as sustainable? No. Can we consider it as a transitional technology? Yes. So if you have a nuclear power plant like the Germans do, then I would get over my dogmatic shadow, jump over it and let them run. Yes. Would I build a new one? I'm not sure. Because also the investment cost for a nuclear power plant are so dramatic high compared to renewable installations.
But many countries do that in Europe. Poland, Romania, build new atomic.
Yeah, but these are plans already, from the past.
So I would agree with Thomas. So if I would be the responsible decision maker, I would continue the three what we still have on the grid, at least until spring, or maybe for 3 years longer. And the atomic waste, what is produced in these 3 years, are percentage-wise a minimum of that what is already there. Yeah. So the situation is worse with the atomic waste, yes. But if we are forced to find another transition energy, then I would say this could be a solution. And in the meantime, then, but really we have to speed up the way how to bring renewables on the road. Yeah, and we have wasted, I would say we have wasted all over Europe in the last 10 years the time. That it's not a question of technology development, it's a question of collaboration and investments in these technologies, and the approval process, the administrative processes which are all around that, what I mean, the grids, yeah, we have to be more pragmatic and have to do that. And then we come to a really sustainable energy system. And I think maybe this crisis, and therefore I said it's a chance in this, maybe this speeds up this process. Like, maybe this comparison is not fully right, but like the digitalization was speeded up during COVID. Yeah, it's here much more serious and much more complex, so therefore it's a little bit bad comparison, but if you want to get innovation, you need to be in a big shit. And that is why I see it can be a chance if we do the right things now.
Okay, let me make one thing clear. I am not a particular friend of nuclear energy, and of course this technology is inherently unsafe. Yeah? There are big risks, and I wouldn't want to live next to a nuclear plant. Okay. Nonetheless, I'm no physicist, but what I hear is there are new nuclear technologies, dual flute reactors, for example, which are a whole lot safer, which do not produce that much waste, and I would say at least take them into consideration. Yeah? Think about it, might that be a way, and don't rule them out ideologically and completely and without thinking about them. This is the first point. Second point is, of course, the holy grail of energy would be fusion energy. So invest much money in this technology and try to get it going. Yes, so fusion energy would be really the ideal solution. Thirdly, I do not quite understand why the German government even thinks about prolonging the running time of the 3 remaining nuclear power plants. I mean, it's quite obvious to me that this is one of the absolutely necessary things to do now, no matter whether you like nuclear power or not. Yes. So far about nuclear power for me.
I have to look a little bit on the time. We arrived at the half of this panel, and I have here a tablet in my hand. You see the Slido code. Already 21 questions arrived. And if we later, everybody wants to answer about 1 minute, then we have 1 hour more, but we don't have 1 hour more. So later on, when we turn to the questions, I would urge to give very short answers. I will try to assemble questions, and maybe not everybody needs to answer everything. But before we go to the question round, I should conclude now a little bit our topic tonight, or tonight, this morning. This morning. I would like a little bit to go to the questions of the German society first, turning to you a little bit, how German households react, how German people react, how they see it, because it's in the end, it's all about the people. And then I would also like Dr. Narbeshuber to elaborate a little bit about how BASF is reacting on this crisis, what kind of possible outcomes of this crisis we can see. Then we can sum up this a little bit, and we turn to you with your questions. Write them here in, but we need to sort them a little bit because they are really getting many. It's really great that there's such a huge interest. And let's go a little bit now to the German society, how they see these things, and also what would be interesting for me, how German people react. Did they get their bills already, or how is it?
So I would say the majority of people are scared and are afraid of what will happen. But the whole reality has not come really to the floor. Yeah, and so the ones who can do something start to think about savings, start to change their heating system, start to optimize the heating system. But of course, there is also a part of the population which don't have the money to do anything against it, which lives in big apartment houses and flats, who can't do it on their own. And I think to this lower part of the society, the government has really to help. And they are doing that, yeah? So hopefully we will come over the winter, and when once the people have survived, I hope they remember that, and this awareness, yeah, that we have to be careful with our resources. And I'm now not only talk about energy resources, about the resources and the circumstances in which we live. This is not a self-understanding. Yeah, they have to become again aware that we have to do something for that, and that not always it goes up with the wealth.
Okay, so German society is affected quite differently. Of course, as we heard yesterday, there are the, well, say, top 10 or 20% who can weather this storm without any problem. Then there is the very bottom, those who live on welfare. They don't care too much really either, because their energy and their home heating and their electricity consumption is paid for by the state, and welfare is adjusted according to inflation. So they don't care too much either. The problem is what I would call the working poor. Those who manage to make their living on their own, who do not rely on the state, but who just scrape by. Yeah? And they are hit hardest. Yeah? They are hit hardest. They do not know whether they can manage to heat their homes, whether they can fill up their gas tanks of the cars. And they are now, these are the very people who are now having second thoughts about the sanctions towards Russia. These are the people who are going into the streets in East Germany and protesting and demanding that the policy be changed. Yeah? So it's very, it's very different. It's not easy to give an answer to German society. There are several segments of German society, and people do not have a unanimous opinion. Furthermore, German industry is also, sounding the alarm bells. Yeah? Yesterday we heard that German industry already saved lots of energy. Gas consumption this year is down by more than 20%, but gas consumption is down because production was cut. Yeah, production was cut, and this is not really a sign of a success. This is an extremely dangerous warning sign, because the next step will be to relocate production out of Germany. So I may exaggerate a little bit, but I think the deindustrialization of Germany has already begun, and it's high time that something be done against it. Yeah?
But I would also be interested how Hungarian people feel and face it. Maybe we have the chance later to get a voice out of that.
We shall discuss that, but I have to keep to my position as the moderator and not sleek out from this position. I could tell you over hours, but I think we shall discuss it in the aftermath, but we shall give the auditorium the floor to learn about Germany, because you see the big interest of Germany. Nobody went out of the room so far, I can oversee. So this is really a Saturday morning. I'm thinking a little bit about...
Let me continue for the industry position.
We shall do that. One sentence. One sentence. You have to moderate me sometimes as well. When you ask about Hungary, I think we had this experience in the 90s, in the 2000 years, that Hungarian households have been looking on energy bills. They didn't know how to pay the bill in the end of the month. Now, about the energy costs, this kind of, in the last years, by the so-called energy cost reduction by government decree, went out. So we don't have that anymore. Now we see that in the German society, people looking on the bills. And I have to be also self-critical. I think there's, of course, in Hungary also, this is a good policy, but not everything is perfect. Of course, people are still heating much. So there's a lot of room to improve. I'm, for example, very fine with 19 degrees. Somebody not. So this is an individual question. But we don't have these really hard times with the energy bills at the end of every month. This is what might come now to Germany. And now the floor is yours for the BASF company and the possible solutions.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Söllner gave me actually the right keyword now, deindustrialization. So you heard me speak very positively before, and that was long term. If we look short term for next year, we are all together in deep shit. Let's be very clear here. It has started, the industry has started to shut down plants. Not because we don't have gas, but because we are not economic anymore. Now, so far, what was helping us was that the supply chains, the international supply chains, specifically from China, they did not work, so there were no imports, but now the imports are coming, slowly but steadily. And that has the potential, as Professor Söllner said, to eradicate the German industry. If the German industry has a flu, we all know that the rest of Europe has a lung infection. This is also very clear, specifically Central, Southeast Europe. So there's only one conclusion: we must not have this happen. And I'm not a macroeconomist, I'm not a clever politician, I'm only a chemical engineer, but I think I have the one or the other idea how that can work. First of all, we need to get nervosity out of the markets. There is a lot of uprise in the markets, and we let the markets determine free. What we need now is war economy. We are in a proper economic war. We need war economy for the critical raw materials, and the critical raw materials is also energy. And I see that the European Union and the member states are working on that. And we don't need any national stunts here. We need a whole solution from all the member states of the European Union to go forward here and to protect the industry. I mentioned it before. Second thought: why is the raw material industry important? The energy-intensive raw material like steel, chemicals, paper, cement, and so on. Why is that important to have it in Europe? I have two arguments for that. One, we saw during the COVID crisis how dependent we were on basic pharmaceuticals, masks, and whatever you had, which did not arrive anymore because the supply chains were broken. And if you have that for critical raw materials, then you end up in the same situation. And second is you need to think a little bit deeper. If we do not have the raw material industry, which provides the innovations actually, which drive our sustainability, if you do not have this industry on the continent anymore, there is literally no argument why you should have any other industry on this continent. Because why should suddenly, let me take an automotive producer or a tier supplier, fly to China to procure his raw materials or do some innovations with them over there to produce then in Europe? Then he can right away produce it somewhere else. That would indeed lead to what Professor Söllner said, a deindustrialization of Europe, and we cannot have that happen.
So, we shall turn to the questions of the auditorium, if you agree. I have many, many questions. I think not every question can be answered by everybody, but let's try. We do it strictly chronologically like they came in. If wind power is so important for Germans, how come they buy electricity from France that is created by nuclear plants and from Poland that comes from coal mines?
So, unfortunately, the nuclear power plants in France are at the moment in a very bad shape. They have 56 nuclear power plants, and I think more than half are under revision. Because this revision, what periodically has to happen, was postponed in COVID times, and it's now. So France will not deliver that electricity what they normally deliver. That is one topic, and in Poland, the economy in Poland and the inhabitants needs their coal production. So there is not the luxury that Germany can rely on their neighbor states. So, and this also brings in this stress test what the Germans has done. These were also the reasons why even the Greens started to think to prolong the running of the atomic plants.
It's short-term, long-term.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, we have here a political question coming from Bence. Some other Bence in the room. Are there any possible ways of ceasefire, or we have to wait until the political establishments change both in the US and Russia? Who wants to answer that?
Where's the question?
We have to wait for a change of political establishments in US and Russia.
That's a statement, not a question.
It's rather a statement, I would think so. Yeah, most Germans are terrified of the option that nuclear power plants probably will switch back. Why? Why are Germans terrified by the power plant?
I'm not sure they are terrified.
They are not sure about that.
People are beginning to have second thoughts now.
Okay.
Yeah, as I just said, not just me, but most people do not like nuclear power, but they begin to see there the second worst solution, better than having no power at all.
So to be honest, I spent my whole business life in RWE. And I was really part of this atomic story. Because there was a prolongation, then there was a stop, then there was another prolongation, and I, as a lawyer, was at any time involved in these negotiations and in the agreement with the government. It was an up and down. And the final topic came in 2011 when this tsunami braked in Japan, Fukushima. That was suddenly a mental shock for the Germans. I do not know why, because I can promise that German technologies in the engineers are the most safest atomic power plants, I would say, in the world. Yeah, and the newest ones. So, but this was psychologische thought which went through the whole population, and there Angela Merkel, who also was physikerin, who knows the technology best, but she decided to make again a step out of the originally agreed prolongation. So that was historically.
The German public in most of polls in the recent times was anti-nuclear, but this changed a little bit. So the polls are changing, and the German society is welcoming actually at least the prolongation of the existing plants. The next question is, can we cover our total energy need with renewables? How much time is it to build a network for that? Can be fusion reactors a solution?
Well, fusion reactors would be a solution, of course, but the big question is when will they come online? I mean, 20 years, 30 years, who knows? And until then, we have to have another power source, and renewables on their own, without any backup system, I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical about that. I think we cannot rely on the renewables in the midterm, maybe in the long term, if we, but not that fast.
Let me counteract that a little bit. I think we need balancing capacity. Yes, that might be gas, that might be any technology, doesn't matter. But don't forget, we are having, Marie-Theres and me were years ago already discussing about the potential to store energy. And Marie-Theres at that time was even speculating about a world where electric cars charged by induction loops standing on the road be an energy storage. Now, BASF, for example, is one of the world's largest manufacturer of cathode materials, so the cathodes which go into batteries, lithium-ion batteries. But we have also other technologies, sodium-sulfur batteries, which can These are cubes of one 20-foot container, and one 20-foot container can, for example, supply 20,000 households for a day. We sell that now in Southeast Europe, where there's a lot of sun and where wind parks are erected. So there are solutions for energy storage. The Austrians, for example, they pump their water up back again to the mountain, and then they use it again in the turbine. So there are solutions. We just need to be creative. I think it's possible. It will take some time. We need stabilization of the industry and of the households, the private sector during this transition. That was the original intention of the European Union with the Green Deal, with this close to 1 trillion funding scheme. But it will take some time. Yes.
Yeah, and I come back to this question of the grid. In this question, the grid was mentioned, yeah? And you can say about baseload or renewables, yeah? For the renewables part, you need grid development. And I can say only in comparing the both countries. So one disadvantage of the very low energy prices here in Hungary is the artificial dropping of the prices by the government. Yeah, you know, the USB and this Regie-Käste Dingsbums. Yeah, genau. So and here there were not enough money in anymore because the grid fees are also part of these prices, and there was not enough money for the investments by Mavir or by the distribution system operators like the MVM grid and the E.ON grid. And that is, of course, recognized, and the Hungarian government knows that. They knows that, and they have to invest from wherever money sources at all into the grid. In Germany, the prices are higher, and the grid fees are also higher, and these companies can invest in grid, but there are huge procedures for approval for new grids, especially for those ones who are the relevant ones from north to the south, to transport the wind energy from the north to the south. Yeah? Bavaria even have forbidden to build overhead lines. They want all cable lines, and cable lines more expensive. The procedure is even much more longer. But the industry is permanently, yeah. But the government didn't do anything against it because they have to agree. The Bund has to agree with the countries on that, yeah, on the law to change. So this lack of investment in grid has different reasons in the both countries.
I'm continuing with the next question. Which new technologies can store renewable energy efficiently, besides high fall water streams and electric batteries? So a question about the storing of renewable energy. Which new technologies can store?
The best possibility, of course, is not a new technology; it's an old one. In Austria and Norway, they pump the water up the mountains, and this is the perfect storage. But unfortunately, you can't do it in Hungary. You can't do it in Germany. Okay. Batteries won't work. You cannot build that many batteries. I don't think it's possible. Hydrogen. Extremely inefficient. There are high energy losses in the transformations. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry.
But that will come. Hydrogen, but it will not come short term. And there are use cases for hydrogen which will work and for what it is effective.
Why do you consider electric cars green? The batteries store energy made mostly by coal. Besides, their production would exploit several minerals.
No, I can answer this. Our battery production will run completely on green energy. Wow. Because otherwise it does not make sense. This is true.
Maybe the battery production, but what about the energy that goes into the batteries?
I also have an answer for that. If you use a conventional fuel engine, you waste 75% of the energy. because fuel engines have a efficiency degree of 25% to 30%. So you waste 70%. In an electric car has an energy efficiency of 95%. So you save already 70% of the primary energy. And in the long run, this primary energy needs to be also green. No question.
And the best savings is at all reduce movement. Or do it in a co-movement, go to a public transport, yeah?
Here is a very short question. Did you know that there's a nuclear reactor 900 meters away from here at the Budapest University of Technology?
Yes.
Did you know?
Yes.
Did you know?
No.
What a surprise. Does a sustainable
Makes me scared now.
Does a sustainable future require significant sacrifices for the average person? In 2050, will plane travel and meat consumption be luxurious goods? So whether we can still in 2020 fly with the plane and eat meat, or will it be a luxury?
I think we always say sustainability ends at the shelf. Now, when it comes to the consumer decision, and he shall pay a higher price for something, I think it will not come immediately, but I think we will not have to give up all of our living standards. But I always say, tell the example, and this is very extreme what I tell you now. When I was visiting my grandma in Austria, and she was not a poor person, she was heating one room, namely the kitchen, and all the other rooms were not heated in winter. Today, I live in my house happily, 350 square meters, 22 degrees everywhere. Is that necessary? Maybe not. So to give you this very tangible own example, we can reduce, and we have to reduce, and we have to rethink.
Yes, I think sacrifices will have to be made, and I'm afraid in 2050 to fly tourism with airplanes and meat consumption will become luxuries. And there's another kind of sacrifice which is not talked about that often, and which I'm even more concerned about. If you look at the Green Deal and at the Fit for 55 program of the EU closely and read what is being proposed, there are so many regulations and our liberty, the economic freedom is being restricted enormously. Yeah, so our whole way of living will be changed if this Fit for 55 program, if this Green Deal is being followed through. Yeah, it's going to be a completely new economic system. Formerly, you could do anything that wasn't forbidden, but in the future, it will be that you must do only the things that you are allowed to do.
Yeah, but I'm fully convinced. So we all three here are fossils. Yeah, part of a fossil generation. You are here the future, and it depends on you how you will create your life in 2050. So we can tell something, but it's up to the majority of the younger generation what values they will live and what is for them important or not important.
Let me make one comment. I can only, I'm for a change. I'm in agreement with you.
Oh, great.
That's what I meant before with meaningful and common legislation and allowing sufficient transition times to bring the population and the industry with us. Currently, to give you numbers, the European Green Deal has produced already 7,000 pages of laws, and we are by far not at the end. A small and medium enterprise can by no way digest that. We can do that as BASF, we have sufficient resources, but it's hard to implement and it's hard to follow through sometimes, but a small and medium enterprise, no way. It will take decades to implement it. So we need to come to a more pragmatic more science-based and less dogmatic lawmaking in the European Union.
I'm looking a little bit on the clock. We have still 17 minutes, and I'm trying to be very democratic to read out all the questions, but they are keeping flooding in. Yeah. So maybe in the end we will not manage. Maybe to you, try to answer the questions shortly. I know it is hard, but let's try to give everybody the chance to have their questions. Some questions are repeating themselves, so I'm trying to a little bit catch up with that. Ibrahim is asking to you, Dr. Narbeshuber, directly. Where is it now? Oh. Yes, sustainable economy, Dr. Narbeshuber, is it really possible? It looks only a fancy or frenzy eye-catching phrase.
I'm happy to discuss that with you, whoever asked the question in the coffee break, but good. Yes, it's definitely possible.
Ibrahim should come in the coffee break to us.
Absolutely.
He has another question as well. He's very active. How come is it possible for Estonia to have 15% inflation while other Eurozone countries doesn't have it? Isn't inflation contagious in Eurozone? I think
Estonia?
Estonia is 15%. It's
we are in Hungary. I don't know about this.
Oh. Nobody knows about Estonia?
Well, the inflation rate in the Eurozone are a little bit different from country to country, depending on consumption patterns. For example, maybe the percentage of energy in the consumption in Estonia is higher than in the average European country, but I do not know exactly. I do not know. But that gives me the chance to mention one interesting fact. For example, in Switzerland, inflation is only 3%. Yeah, whereas in the Eurozone we are at 10%, so that may be an indication that at least 7 percentage points of these 10% are due to the policies of the ECB and not to Putin or anybody else.
Here's a short question that can be answered short or long. Does the possible recession kill the green energy?
No, on the contrary, I would say, because this is our only way out.
I agree.
What do you think about the explosions on the Nord Stream pipeline? Will it stop the transport of Russian gas into the European Union?
I think this is not the question. We can forget about Russian gas. This will not happen anymore.
Nobody will rely anymore on Russian as a supplier.
Okay.
I think this is a mistake. Why wouldn't we rely on Russia in the future? I mean, this reminds me of this person who currently occupies the chair of the foreign ministry in Germany, who said that she wants to destroy Russia and we will never ever import anything from Russia. This seems to be utter nonsense to me. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that sometime in the future again? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean we should rely on Russia. No, definitely not. But
that is what I said. I would not rely on that. Yeah.
If you are an industry and you want a long-term supply contract, we've seen what Russia did. So this is off. This is simply off.
So I would go so far black and white that nobody would do trade with Russia. That is not what I said. But on these very, very important resources, yeah, we would not be relying on that like we did in the past.
Okay, let's agree on that.
Balázs is asking, how long can governments apply electricity price limits for consumers?
As long as they have money. So it's utter waste of money. It's completely nonsense to do this. Really, yeah.
Here the colleague is right because it only elaborates on the symptoms and not on the real underlying reasons.
Are energy-intensive industries viable in Europe in the 21st century, or should we shift our focus to innovation and digitalization?
Yeah, we had this discussion yesterday, and I made my statement before. I don't know where the question came from. Yesterday, Mr. Zachman from, I don't remember.
Bruegel Institute.
Yeah, he was also promoting a thing, let's ban all the energy-intensive industries and shift them to Canada and to wherever, US and China and Australia. I gave you my arguments before why I think this is a big mistake.
Here is not a question, but a suggestion for us how to pronounce rezsicsökkentés. Somebody wrote it. Thank you very much for this hint.
Although I had to deal 10 years with that, yeah, I did not really learn to pronounce that.
In the break, we will make a little small exercise.
Yeah. But I'm proud that as company I coped with that and that I survived with that.
How can we rely on some leaders who are marching down the road of destructing EU industries? So some leaders are destroying EU industries.
We should get rid of them, of
We
course.
should get rid of them. Okay. Bence is asking, there's again a Bence here, there is still the Turkish stream going through the Balkan. Are you sure that it's a good solution being cut off Russian gas immediately?
It's not a good solution, of course.
Why are some countries?
I think we need to be clear here. Not all Russian gas imports to Europe, to the best of my knowledge, are cut off.
No.
There is still gas flowing through the Ukraine and I think also through the Turkish pipeline.
But the question was whether it should be cut off.
And nobody said, everybody in Europe was against, specifically Hungary, Austria, Germany all together were against a gas embargo. So
I think there's a question to one of the statements in the very beginning of our session. Why are some countries or governments welcoming inflation? Is the question.
Because,
why are there some countries
because
welcoming
their debt
inflation?
will become less. Yeah, the government debt will be devalued because of inflation, very simply.
Robert Habeck, the German Minister for Economy, said that parts of the economy could halt due to the rising energy prices. Could Germany permanently lose employment and GDP, in your opinion? Permanently lose GDP and employment?
I think the next 3 to 5 years will be no fun. We need to move this transition forward with force and worth. But afterwards, I think we can look very, very competitive again. If I give you again these initial statements on the energy cost, if we really move towards, in Europe, we have cheap labor. Even Germany is internationally compared cheap labor. And if we can secure cheap energy or competitive energy, we have still the best brains on the world. So,
I think next question goes to you. BASF produces very important raw materials for many branches. What price increase of raw materials, e.g. TDI, can still be expected?
Okay. Now I have to go back again, and that's why I mentioned at the very beginning, it's the war per se is only the last part. What we saw, and yesterday the colleague from MOL has described it very nicely. We went first into the COVID crisis and everything stopped. Every economy stopped, and then the industry stopped producing, the supply chains broke, and so on. Every prognosis I heard after 3 months, and we were sitting partially together with Marie and with others, we were sitting in panels of macroeconomists, and they were all forecasting a dark black future for years. So this was this trough so we will not come out of the crisis like before, when was it, 2020? So before next year. What we experienced together with the rest of the industry, and you could experience it as consumers, we were sold out by the end of 2020, completely sold out. We could not produce more. You went to IKEA and you could not buy furniture anymore. You were waiting for cars, you were waiting for everything. So why did that happen? And the colleagues yesterday explained that very nicely. Because the markets were flooded with money. The Chinese could not deliver or had an own high domestic demand. And people could not spend their disposable income on what they normally spend it on, because restaurants were not open, holidays were not possible, and so on. So everybody started to buy new stuff, refurbish their homes, and so on. And only then the crisis hit. So we were sold out, and also the raw material prices already doubled long before the war. Now they quadrupled because of the war.
I see. Now here's a question from the Department of Political Philosophy. I don't know whether you take it. Nuclear stands for security. Renewable stands for Europe-scale network building and integration. Isn't this the main reason why conservatives dislike the latter? It's maybe a statement. Or
I didn't really catch the question.
yes, the question is, it's not really a question, it's a statement, I think. I repeat, nuclear stands for security. Renewable stands for Europe-scale network building and integration. Isn't that the main reason why conservatives dislike the latter? So it's a very political question to other political scientists. We take it in the break if there's some political scientists around. What kind of global processes are worth to discuss on the topic? It is a very general question. Have we really entered into a recession cycle? Isn't it yet too early to conclude that we are already in recession?
Not yet, not yet. GDP decreased last quarter, and it depends what happens next quarter. But if it decreases next quarter, we are officially in a recession.
Good. Here's an advertisement for the German public broadcast, a statement to understand the German Atomkraftnovelle in detail. The audience should watch the ZDF May Think X show from the 25th of September. Thank you very much for this hint. We will look on that. Building new nuclear power plants takes a lot of time. How can you ensure that the waste will safe? How can you ensure that the waste will be safe? Es gibt noch kein Endlager.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true, and that is a reason, mainly reason why the German government stepped out of that, because this knowledge is sure. There is no possibility yet to have a clear endlager. Yeah.
Here's a statement: natural gas is a feedstock. No gas, no related production. No, it's not good. Yeah.
But
yeah, let me take that. So first of all, not everything is black and white, and we need to have a look at the total energy consumption or gas consumption, gas and oil consumption. 4% of the global oil and gas demand go as a raw material. 4%. 40% go to traffic and 40% go to heating, and the rest goes to industry as a fuel. Only 4% are needed as a raw material. This can be easily supplied. Second, we, for example, at BASF, we're working also in Hungary with a partner on end-of-life tire recycling and plastic recycling, where we reuse the materials and try to drive circular economy. So I think there's not a problem.
What Ibrahim is asking again, what are the possible adverse effects of climate change on renewables? The adverse effects of climate change on renewables. Big question mark.
Maybe it goes into the direction that, for example, windmills hits
That's
the nature,
the big discussion in Germany, of
hits
course.
the birds. Yeah, and to be honest, wind is also not a favorable resource for Hungary, because they dislike wind mills, and maybe it's also not that much sources of wind here. Yeah?
And then we are coming now to the really two last questions, if I'm correct. How can Hungary be independent of Russia in case of nuclear, if all necessary base ideas are connected to Russia in case of box projects? That's a question to the Hungarian. We have Germans on the panel, and there's a last question here, or somebody takes it to stick in the role of Hungary. No. And I think this is the last question, then we manage it. Anonymous is asking, what is your climate change worst case scenario? Worst case scenario to the end, not very optimistic, but let's try that.
I don't want to speculate, because nobody knows that, and there's a lot of science out there which talk about global inflection points. Some of them have already been reached, but we, for example, in Germany, but also here in Hungary, we see the climate crisis already acting. In dry summers, we cannot ship the River Rhine anymore because the water level is too low. And if you look to Hungary, this summer was specifically for agriculture, but also for shipping on the Danube, a disastrous summer. If I'm correct, 25% of the harvest was going bust. That is no fun. This is very clear. So if it goes to agricultural losses, if it goes to industrial losses because you cannot transport and ship anymore, if the people we had, like in Schoima here across the mountain, they did not have water supply anymore. Debrecen was talking about the biggest drought ever. So I think I cannot speculate more, but there's a lot of scientists out there who know it better. But I think we see the events happening.
And I think there's a last question. I overread it. I'm very sorry. Very general question. It could sum up a little bit around. Are Germans ready to sacrifice their well-being by not using nuclear and fossil energy systems for the well-being of our ecosystem? So whether Germany is ready to lose the well-being?
Short answer would be no.
No.
A longer answer would be there are some who are ready. These activists from this so-called last generation and Fridays for Future and so on and so forth, who at least say they would sacrifice a lot. I haven't seen them sacrifice anything until now, so maybe they will have second thoughts if it gets serious. But the majority of the population seems to think, oh well, how bad can it be? Okay, summer is getting a little bit warmer and there's a little bit less precipitation, but we can get by. So we may change in the long run, but not now, and please not too fast. So that seems to be the prevalent attitude in Germany, if I read the sentiment correctly.
But I'm convinced that we will overcome this crisis like Thomas has described. And when there are some necessities, that we stay together unified in Europe, that we talk to each other like today organized. So thank you for that. Yeah. So dialogue is absolutely important between the European countries, so not only between Hungary and Germany, but also between whole Eastern Europe and Germany. So we talk a lot in Germany with the western part of Europe, but I think the dialogue with Eastern Europe is absolutely important. And out of this collaboration and understanding of each other, the innovation power will bring us forward, and then there will be a more sustainable Europe in the future.
Thank you. We are at -2 minutes. This was a perfect closing remark. If nobody wants to add to that, I very much thank to the panelists. I had big fun discussing with you. Thank you very much to the audience for the great questions.